She grew up in a place where most people lived quiet lives and expected very little from each other. It was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, yet somehow she was still invisible. She was not loud, not bold, not the kind of person teachers pointed out or neighbors talked about. She blended into the background like a shadow at the edge of a room. People remembered her face only after seeing her many times, and even then, they struggled to recall anything special about her. Her family lived simply. There was no extra money for hobbies or lessons or big dreams. Her parents worked long hours, coming home tired, doing their best to keep life steady. They cared for her deeply, but survival always came first. Conversations at home were about bills, work schedules, and getting through the next week. Dreams were not something discussed often. Talent was not something anyone looked for. At school, she was the quiet one who sat near the window. She did her work, turned it in on time, and rarely caused trouble. Teachers described her as polite and average, not gifted, not struggling. Just there. When group projects were assigned, she was usually given small tasks. No one expected her to lead. No one expected her to surprise them. She noticed this early on. She saw how people reacted to others who spoke louder or laughed harder. She learned that staying quiet meant being safe, but it also meant being unseen. Over time, she stopped trying to stand out at all. It was easier to accept the role given to her than to fight it. Music existed in her world, but only in small ways. A radio played softly while her mother cooked. A neighbor practiced guitar late at night. Once in a while, music floated through the open windows of passing cars. It was background noise to most people. To her, it felt different, though she could not explain why. The first time she saw a violin up close, she was still very young. It was during a school event. Nothing special, just a short performance meant to fill time. A student stood on stage and played a simple piece. The sound was thin and shaky, but something about it held her attention. She did not clap louder than others. She did not speak about it afterward. She just remembered the sound after that. She began to notice violins wherever she could. On television, in old videos, sometimes even in pictures. She did not know how they worked. She did not know how hard they were to play. She only knew that the sound stayed with her longer than anything else. Still, she never asked for lessons. She never told anyone she was interested. In her mind, interest alone was not enough. People like her did not become musicians. That was for children with confident parents, spare money, and clear paths. She did not see herself fitting into that world. As the years passed, life continued the same way. School days followed a routine. Wake up early, walk to class, sit quietly, come home, help with small chores. Repeat. She did well enough to avoid attention, but never well enough to earn praise. When awards were handed out, her name was never called. When talents were discussed, her name never came up. There were moments when she felt a quiet frustration. Not anger, not sadness exactly, but a sense of being stuck. Like standing behind a glass wall watching others move forward while she stayed still. She wondered if this was all life would ever be. Just existing, unnoticed, expected to fade into the same pattern as everyone before her. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, she imagined another version of herself. Someone braver. Someone seen. Someone whose presence mattered. But these thoughts felt dangerous, like wishing for something she had no right to want. So she pushed them away and focused on what was real. Her classmates moved on to talking about future plans. Some wanted to be doctors. Some wanted to leave town. Some already believed they were meant for bigger things. She listened, but rarely spoke. When asked about her own plans, she gave simple answers. She would figure it out later. She would see what happened. People accepted this easily. It matched the version of her they already believed in. Someone with no clear direction, no strong passion, no spark. No one questioned it. No one looked closer. What they did not see were the small moments that shaped her inner world. The way she paused when music played. The way certain sounds made her chest feel tight, as if something inside her was trying to speak, the way her fingers moved absent-mindedly, tracing patterns on desks and tables. As if they were searching for something familiar, she herself did not fully understand these feelings. She only knew they were private and fragile. She did not have the words to explain them, and even if she did, she doubted anyone would listen. One afternoon, while helping clean out an old storage room at a community center, she noticed a dusty case in the corner. It was worn, scratched, clearly forgotten. Curious, she opened it. Inside lay a violin that had seen better days. One string was missing. The wood was dull. It looked like something no one wanted anymore. She stared at it longer than necessary. A volunteer nearby laughed and said it was probably broken, useless. Someone else suggested throwing it away. She said nothing. She simply closed the case carefully, as if afraid the instrument might disappear. That night, she could not stop thinking about it. Not about playing it, just about its presence. The idea that something so beautiful could be forgotten so easily felt strangely personal. Like the violin, she thought, maybe some things were overlooked, not because they lacked value, but because no one took the time to notice. She did not know then that this moment mattered. She did not know it would be the beginning of something bigger. All she knew was that for the first time something had stirred inside her, quietly but firmly. To the world around her she remained the same, quiet, ordinary, easy to overlook. No one expected anything from her, and because of that, no one was watching closely. But deep inside, something had begun to wake up. And though it was still small and uncertain, it refused to disappear. Even if no one else saw it yet, even if she herself doubted it. A story had already started to form, waiting patiently for its moment to be heard, after that day at the community center. Her thoughts changed in small but steady ways. She went back to her normal routine, but something inside her no longer felt fully asleep. The image of the old violin stayed in her mind. She wondered who had played it before and why it had been left behind. She wondered what kind of hands had once held it with care. She told herself it meant nothing. It was just curiosity. Nothing more. But she began to notice music more than ever before. When a song played on the radio, she paid attention to the instruments instead of the words. When someone hummed nearby, she listened closely to the rhythm. Sounds that once passed through her days without meaning now felt heavier, like they were asking something of her. She still did not talk about it. Not at home, not at school, not even to herself out loud. Her life had taught her that wanting too much only led to disappointment. So she kept everything quiet, tucked safely inside where no one could question it. A few days later, she returned to the community center to help again. She told herself she was just being responsible, just doing what was asked, but her eyes searched the room almost without her permission. She looked toward the corner where the dusty case had been. It was still there. No one else seemed to care. People walked past it as if it were invisible. She stood still for a moment, feeling unsure. Then, slowly, she walked over and opened it again. The violin looked the same as before, worn and tired, but still whole. She touched the edge of the case lightly, then pulled her hand back, as if afraid she might cross a line. A staff member noticed her lingering and asked if she played. The question caught her off guard. She shook her head quickly. "No," she said. She didn't play anything. The staff member shrugged and said the violin had been sitting there for years. No one claimed it. No one wanted it. Without fully thinking it through, she asked if she could borrow it. The word surprised even her. They felt strange in her mouth, bold in a way she was not used to. The staff member looked at her for a moment, then laughed softly and said, "Sure, as long as she brought it back." It wasn't worth much anyway. She nodded, heart beating faster than usual, and closed the case carefully. Carrying it felt heavier than she expected. Not just the weight of the instrument, but the meaning of it. It felt like she was carrying a question she did not yet know how to answer. At home, she waited until the house was quiet. She placed the case on the floor and opened it slowly, as if the violin might react. She lifted it out with both hands. It smelled old, like dust and wood. One string was missing, just as she remembered. She had no idea how to hold it properly. She adjusted it again and again, awkward and unsure. She tried placing it under her chin the way she had seen others do. It felt uncomfortable, unnatural. She nearly gave up right then, embarrassed even though no one was watching. But she stayed. She found an old video online that explained the basics. How to hold the bow, how to place the fingers, how to stand. Her movements were stiff and clumsy. When she tried to draw the bow across the strings, the sound that came out was rough and unpleasant. She flinched, afraid someone might hear. Her first instinct was to stop. This was proof, she thought. Proof that she was not meant for this. But something made her try again, and again. The sounds were still bad, sometimes painful, but every now and then, just for a second, a clear note appeared. Those brief moments kept her going. They felt like small lights in the dark. It's easy to miss, but impossible to forget once seen. She practiced only at night, quietly, carefully. She placed a cloth against the strings to soften the sound. She did not want to disturb anyone. She did not want questions. This was her secret, and she guarded it closely. Days turned into weeks. Her fingers hurt. Her arms ached. More than once, she considered giving up. There were nights she sat on the floor, violin in her lap, feeling foolish for even trying. Who did she think she was? Why was she pretending to be something she was not? But each time she thought of quitting, she remembered the way the violin had been left behind, forgotten, unwanted, and she felt a strange connection to it, as if they were learning together. She did not measure progress the way trained musicians might. She did not count techniques or styles. She measured it in smaller ways. How long she could play without stopping. How much less her hand shook. How the noise slowly became sound. She still went to school. Still helped at home. Still lived her quiet life. No one noticed the calluses forming on her fingers. No one noticed the way her posture changed slightly. It's like she was holding something invisible even when her hands were empty. Sometimes during class, her mind drifted. She imagined sounds instead of words. She imagined the feeling of the bow moving smoothly. She caught herself tapping rhythms softly against the desk. When teachers corrected her for not paying attention, she apologized and returned to her work. On the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. She fixed the missing string with money she saved slowly, skipping small comforts. When she replaced it, the violin felt more complete, and so did she. The sound improved little by little. Still far from good, but no longer painful to hear, she began to play simple melodies she found online. Children's songs, old folk tunes. Nothing impressive, but she played them again and again until her fingers remembered the shapes on their own. Some nights, when the sound came out just right, she closed her eyes. In those moments, the rest of the world faded away. There was no judgment, no expectations, no fear of being seen. Just her, the violin, and the space between each note. She did not realize how much time passed, how deeply this quiet practice was shaping her. She did not think of herself as talented. She thought of herself as stubborn. Someone who refused to stop even when it was hard. Still, doubt followed her closely. She wondered what would happen if someone found out. She imagined laughter, raised eyebrows, gentle discouragement, people telling her to be realistic, to focus on practical things, so she kept her secret. But secrets, no matter how carefully held, have a way of growing. And as her playing slowly improved, as her connection to the instrument deepened, the space she had created for herself began to feel too small to hold what was coming next. She did not know it yet. But the quiet nights, the aching fingers, the lonely practice sessions were preparing her for a moment she could never have planned. A moment where hiding would no longer be possible. For now, though, she remained unseen, still underestimated, still unnoticed by the world around her, and that was exactly what allowed her to keep going. Life continued to move forward, even as her world quietly changed. The seasons shifted without much notice. Days grew shorter, then longer again. Through it all, she kept practicing whenever she could. Not because she believed it would lead somewhere, but because stopping felt impossible. The violin had become part of her routine, like breathing. something she did without thinking too hard about why. There were days when progress felt real. Her fingers moved with less effort. The bow no longer shook as much. Notes connected instead of crashing into each other. On those days, she felt a calm pride, quiet and steady. Not the kind that needed praise. Just the kind that told her she was not wasting her time. Then there were days when everything felt wrong. The sound turned rough again. Her hands felt stiff. Doubt returned, loud and heavy. On those nights, she stared at the violin and wondered if she had imagined all her improvement. If maybe she had been fooling herself all along. Still she kept going. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. Her school announced a small cultural event meant to bring the community together. There would be food, short talks, and a few performances. Nothing serious. Just a way to fill an evening and give people something to do. When she heard about it, she barely paid attention at first. Events like that were usually loud and crowded. Places where she felt uncomfortable. She planned to help with setup and cleanup, like always. Then quietly leave. But a notice caught her eye. One of the performers listed was a well-known violinist who happened to be visiting the area. Someone respected, someone with years of experience. The kind of person whose name people recognized, even if they did not fully understand why. She read the notice twice. Then a third time. Her first reaction was simple disbelief. Someone like that coming to her small town felt unreal. Her second reaction was fear. A tight feeling in her chest she could not explain. That night, she did not practice. She sat on the floor with the violin still in its case, staring at the wall. Thoughts ran through her mind faster than usual. What would it be like to hear a real professional play in person? Would the sound be different? Better? Would it make her feel inspired? Or would it remind her how far she still had to go? A small voice inside her whispered something she tried hard to ignore. What if this was a chance? A chance to be seen. A chance to step out of the shadows. She pushed the thought away quickly. That was not realistic. That was not for someone like her. In the days leading up to the event, she felt restless. She practiced more than usual, though she did not know why. She told herself it was just habit. But her hands moved with a strange urgency. Like they were preparing for something her mind refused to accept. She did not tell anyone about the event. Not at home, not at school. She did not want questions or expectations. She did not want anyone watching her too closely. When the day arrived, the community center filled with people. Laughter echoed through the halls. The smell of food mixed with the sound of voices. She helped arrange chairs, set up tables, and carry boxes. She moved quietly through the space, useful but unnoticed. Then she saw him. The violinist stood near the stage, speaking with organizers. His posture was confident, relaxed. He held his instrument like it was an extension of himself, not something fragile or unfamiliar. Watching him made her feel small, like she was standing at the bottom of a very tall mountain. Her heart beat faster. She told herself. She was just nervous because the place was crowded. Nothing more. As the event began, people took their seats. She stood near the back, ready to step away once her help was no longer needed. She did not plan to stay for the performances. She did not trust herself to watch without comparing. But when the violinist walked onto the stage, she froze. The first note he played filled the room completely. It was rich, controlled, and full of feeling. Each movement of the bow seemed effortless. The audience leaned forward without realizing it. Even those who knew little about music could sense the skill. She felt something twist inside her chest. Not jealousy, not sadness, something closer to awe. As she listened, she noticed details she had never noticed before. The way the sound rose and fell, the way silence mattered just as much as the notes. She felt both inspired and painfully aware of her own limits. When the performance ended, the room erupted in applause. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. The violinist smiled modestly, nodding in thanks. She clapped too, though her hands felt numb. Afterward, the event continued with smaller activities. People talked, laughed, and shared opinions about the performance. She tried to return to her tasks, but her mind stayed fixed on the sound. She had just heard, That was when someone noticed the case. She had brought her violin with her without fully thinking it through. It sat tucked behind a table, out of the way. A habit, she told herself. Nothing more. A volunteer asked if she played. The question made her stomach drop. She shook her head automatically, then hesitated. The lie felt heavier than usual. Before she could stop herself, she corrected it. "Just a little," she said. "Not very well." The volunteer smiled and mentioned it casually to someone nearby. The words traveled faster than she expected. Before she knew it, someone suggested she play. Her heart raced. She tried to refuse. She said she was not prepared, that she was just helping, that there were others more suited for it, but the idea lingered in the air. Someone laughed kindly, said it would just be for fun. No pressure. Just a few notes. She looked toward the stage without meaning to. The violinist noticed. Their eyes met briefly. There was no judgment there, just curiosity. That moment stretched longer than it should have. Her mind filled with reasons to say no. Fear, embarrassment, the comfort of staying invisible. But another feeling rose beneath it all. A quiet strength built from long nights and lonely practice. From choosing to continue when no one was watching, her hands moved before her. Thoughts could stop them. She stepped forward. The room grew quieter as she walked toward the stage. Each step felt heavy. She could feel people watching, wondering, expecting very little. She reached the front and paused. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the case. She lifted the violin and held it close. For a moment, she wanted to turn around, to apologize and walk away, to return to the safety of being unseen. Instead, she raised the bow. The room waited, and in that silence, everything she had kept hidden stood on the edge of being revealed. The room felt different when she stood there, violin in her hands. The quiet was no longer casual. It carried weight. People shifted in their seats, some curious, some distracted, some already expecting very little. No one leaned forward. No one whispered about a hidden talent. To them, she was just a quiet helper who had stepped onto the stage by accident. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her grip. The violin felt familiar, yet suddenly heavier than ever. The bow rested lightly against the strings, and for a moment nothing happened. Her mind went blank. The lights felt too bright. The faces blurred together. She took a slow breath. In that breath, she remembered the late nights, the aching fingers, the moments of doubt when she almost quit. She remembered the first clear note she ever managed to play alone in the dark. She remembered why she stayed. She began. The first sound was soft, almost fragile. Not perfect, not bold. A few people glanced at one another, unsure. Someone near the back coughed. The sound floated briefly, then settled. She kept going. The second phrase came out steadier. Her fingers found their places without her needing to think. The bow moved more smoothly. The noise turned into music. Slowly something shifted. The room grew quieter. Conversations stopped. Heads turned toward the stage. What began as polite patience turned into real attention. She did not notice. Her focus narrowed until there was nothing but the violin and the space between each note. The crowd faded. The lights faded. Even her fear faded. Her body remembered what her mind could not interfere with. She played the melody she had practiced the most. Not because it was impressive, but because it felt honest. Each note carried something personal. Not sadness, not joy alone, but a mix of both. The sound told a story without words. Her posture relaxed. The trembling eased. The music grew stronger. People felt it. Someone in the front row stopped smiling politely and leaned forward. A child grew still. A few phones were raised, then lowered again, as if recording felt wrong somehow. Like interrupting something private, the violinist stood off to the side. Watching closely at first, his expression was neutral. He listened the way professionals often do, alert but guarded. He noticed the imperfections, the uneven moments, the places where technique could improve. Then he noticed Something else. He noticed the feeling, the way she shaped the sound, the way she held silence just long enough before moving on, the way the music breathed, not rushed, not forced. His posture changed. She moved into a section that had once given her trouble, a passage she used to avoid because it scared her. Her fingers hesitated for half a second. Then they moved. The notes came out clear, not flawless, but full. The kind of sound that made people forget to judge and simply listen. A hush settled over the room. Even those who had expected nothing now felt something unexpected rise inside them. She played on. Time stretched strangely. What felt like seconds to her felt much longer to the audience. No one checked their phones. No one shifted restlessly. The music held them where they sat. When the final note faded, she did not move right away. The bow stayed in the air. The sound lingered, as if refusing to disappear. For a moment, it was silence. Then applause broke out. It was not polite applause. It was sudden, surprised, and loud. People stood without planning to. Some clapped harder than they meant to. Others shook their heads in disbelief. She flinched at the noise. Her eyes widened. She had not expected this. Her chest felt tight, her breath uneven. She lowered the violin slowly, unsure what to do next. The applause continued. Someone near the front called out encouragement. Someone else laughed in shock. The sound filled the room in a way the music no longer could. She looked toward the side of the stage. The violinist was clapping too, not casually, not politely. His expression was serious, focused, respectful. Their eyes met again, this time. Something passed between them that did not need words. She felt her face warm. Embarrassment mixed with relief. She gave a small nod and stepped back, hands still shaking. People spoke all at once now. Questions floated through the air. Where had she learned? How long had she been playing? Why had no one heard her before? She did not answer. She could barely hear them. The organizers thanked her and guided her off the stage gently. As if afraid she might disappear if touched too roughly, she moved to the side and leaned against the wall, violin held close. Her legs felt weak. Her heart pounded in her ears. She told herself it was over. She had done it. Whatever happened next did not matter, but something was already happening. The violinist approached her slowly, up close. He seemed different, less distant. His presence was calm, steady. He spoke quietly, so only she could hear. He said he had not expected that. He said there was something rare in her playing, not polish, not training, but truth. She struggled to respond. Words felt too small. She nodded, unsure what to say. He asked where she had learned. She told him the truth. Alone at night. With a borrowed violin and no guidance, he listened without interrupting. When she finished, he smiled slightly and said that talent often grows in silence. Those words settled deep inside her, around them. The room slowly returned to normal. People resumed talking, laughing, moving about, but something had changed. She could feel it. She was no longer invisible, not because she wanted attention, not because she sought approval, but because for the first time, she had allowed herself to be heard. The days after the event felt unreal. Life continued the way it always had, yet nothing felt the same. She still woke up early, still walked the same roads, still helped at home and kept to herself. But everywhere she went, she carried a quiet awareness she had never felt before. People looked at her a little longer. Some smiled in a way they hadn't before. Others whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. She tried not to think too much about it. That night, she took the violin out again. Her hands moved easily, familiar and steady. But when she played, the sound felt different. Not better, not worse. Just deeper. As if the music now carried a memory along with it. She stopped after a few minutes and sat quietly. For the first time, she wondered what came next. She had never allowed herself to think beyond the moment. Practice had always been about surviving the day, the week, the doubt. Now, the future felt closer than ever, and that scared her. A message arrived a few days later from the community center. They said the violinist had asked about her. He wanted to speak with her again. She was willing. Her heart raced when she read it. She almost said no. Not because she didn't want to go, but because she was afraid of hoping too much. Afraid that one kind moment would turn into disappointment if she looked too closely. But she went. They met in a quiet room, away from noise and crowds. The violinist listened more than he spoke. He asked about her practice, her background, her days. He did not treat her like a curiosity or a secret to be uncovered. He treated her like a person. He told her the truth. She had a long way to go. Her technique was rough. Her posture needed work. There were habits she would need to unlearn. She nodded, expecting this. Then he told her something else. What she had could not be taught easily. The way she listened to the music, the way she let it breathe, the way she played without trying to impress. He said that could grow if she allowed it to. He offered guidance, not promises, not guarantees, just time, direction, and honesty. She felt overwhelmed. She did not know how to respond. Gratitude mixed with fear, excitement tangled with doubt. She worried about money, about expectations, about what people would think if she failed. He did not rush her. He said she did not need to decide everything at once. That music was not about sudden leaps, but steady steps. That idea stayed with her. She returned home that evening and told her family the truth for the first time. About the violin. About the nights she practiced alone. About the performance. There was silence when she finished. Then questions. Gentle ones. Careful ones. They were surprised, confused, proud in a quiet way. They admitted they had never seen this side of her. Not because they didn't care, but because she had never shown it. That realization was painful and freeing at the same time. She continued practicing, but now with structure, with purpose. The violinist checked in from time to time, offering advice and corrections. She listened closely, learning to balance discipline with feeling. Progress came slowly. Some days felt frustrating. Old doubts returned. She compared herself to others and felt small again. On those days, she remembered where she started. The dusty case. The missing string. The nights when no one was watching. She reminded herself that being seen was not the goal. Being honest was. Over time, opportunities appeared. Small ones. A chance to play at a local gathering. A short performance at a school event. Each time, her hand shook a little less. Each time, her confidence grew not in applause, but in herself. She learned to accept praise without shrinking, to accept criticism without breaking. People still underestimated her sometimes. That no longer hurt the way it once had. She understood now that expectations often said more about others than about her. The violin remained the same worn instrument she had first borrowed. She kept it carefully, repairing it piece by piece. It became a reminder of where she came from and how far she had already traveled. Years later, when people spoke about her story, they often focused on the moment she played in front of the crowd. The surprise. The reaction. The stunned faces. She knew better. The real story lived in the quiet, in the nights no one saw. In the doubts she worked through alone. In the choice to keep going when there was no reward waiting. She never claimed to be special. But she learned something important. Talent does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently, hidden behind fear and silence, until someone is brave enough to let it speak. She had been that someone, and that made all the difference. As time went on, her life slowly settled into a new rhythm. It was not dramatic or fast. There were no sudden changes that made everything feel easy. Instead, things shifted in small, quiet ways. Much like the way her journey had always unfolded, she kept practicing every day. Some sessions were long, others short. Some felt rewarding, others frustrating. But she no longer questioned why she played. The violin was no longer just a secret or a hope. It was part of who she was becoming. She still lived simply. Her days were filled with ordinary tasks, responsibilities, and routines. but now, woven through all of it, was a steady sense of purpose. Even when she felt tired or unsure, she knew she was moving forward, one step at a time. The guidance she received helped her see music differently. She learned that discipline was not meant to erase feeling, but to support it. That control did not mean stiffness. That mistakes were not failures, but signs of growth. There were moments when she struggled to keep up. She watched others who had trained for years who seemed more confident, more prepared. Old doubts crept in during those times, whispering that she did not belong. Instead of running from those thoughts, she faced them. She reminded herself that comparison had once kept her silent. She would not let it take her voice again. She began to play in more public spaces, though never for attention. Sometimes it was just background music for small gatherings. Sometimes it was for people who barely noticed her name, but felt something in the sound. Each performance taught her something new. How to stay calm when her hands shook. How to recover when a note slipped. How to trust herself even when conditions were not perfect. Not every reaction was positive. Some people were kind but distant. Some were honest in ways that stung. A few questioned her path, suggesting safer options, more practical goals. She listened, but she did not retreat. She had learned the difference between advice and fear passed from one person to another. The violinist who had first noticed her checked in less often now. Not because he had lost interest, but because she no longer needed constant direction. She was learning how to listen to herself. That realization felt both freeing and frightening. There were days when she missed the anonymity of her old life. Being unseen had been lonely, but it had also been simple. Now, even small expectations felt heavy at times. On those days, she returned to the basics, simple melodies, slow practice. Playing just for herself, music reminded her why she started. She also learned to rest, to step back when exhaustion clouded her joy, to understand that passion did not mean burning out. This balance did not come easily, but she worked at it. Slowly her confidence grew, not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that stays steady even in silence. She began helping others in small ways, showing a beginner how to hold the bow, encouraging someone who felt discouraged. She did not present herself as an expert. She spoke honestly about struggle. People listened. She saw pieces of her old self in them. The hesitation, the doubt, the quiet hope. Guiding others reminded her how far she had come. There was no single moment when she felt she had arrived. No final destination. Just a series of choices to keep showing up. That was enough. Looking back, she understood that being underestimated had shaped her strength. It had forced her to rely on herself, to grow without applause. To learn patience, she did not wish her past away. It had taught her how to listen, and that skill, more than any technique, lived in every note she played. Her story was never about proving people wrong. It was about finally allowing herself to be right with time. Her world grew wider in ways she never expected. Not louder, not rushed, just wider. More faces, more places, more moments where music found its way into spaces she once thought she would never enter. She moved through it all carefully, still carrying the quiet nature that had always been part of her. She did not wake up one day feeling fearless. Fear still showed up, just in different forms. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of losing the simple joy that first pulled her toward the violin. Fear of becoming someone she did not recognize, so she stayed grounded. She kept her routines. Morning walks when she could. Evening practice when the house was calm. Small breaks when her mind felt too full. These habits reminded her that growth did not require abandoning herself. Opportunities continued to appear one by one. Never overwhelming, never sudden. A small invitation to play alongside others, a chance to join a local ensemble for a short program. Each step felt slightly uncomfortable, and that was how she knew she was still learning. Playing with others taught her patience. She learned how to listen, not just to her own sound, but to the space around it. How to blend without disappearing. How to lead without forcing. At first, she doubted herself constantly. She worried she would slow others down, that her late start would show, that people would notice what she still lacked instead of what she offered. But something unexpected happened. Others began to trust her. They noticed how carefully she listened, how she adjusted instead of insisting, how she paid attention to the feeling of a piece, not just the notes. That trust built quietly. Just like her confidence had, she remembered what it felt like to be invisible. And because of that, she never took attention lightly. She made room for others. She encouraged questions. She spoke honestly about uncertainty. Music became a shared experience rather than a performance. There were setbacks, of course. Days when she felt stuck again. Times when progress slowed so much it felt like standing still. Moments when she wondered if she had reached the limit of what she could become. Instead of panicking, she learned to wait. She learned that growth often happens beneath the surface, long before it shows. During one quiet period, she returned to the community center where everything had begun. The building looked the same. The walls carried the same marks. The storage room still smelled of dust and old wood. She stood there for a long moment, remembering the girl she once was. The one who opened a forgotten case without knowing it would change her life. She felt gratitude, not for recognition, not for praise, but for persistence. She realized that if things had moved faster, she might not have been ready. The slow pace had protected her, shaped her, allowed her to grow roots instead of chasing results. Later, she began offering her time at the center, helping organize small music sessions. Nothing formal, just space for people to try to listen, to make mistakes without fear. She watched others take their first uncertain steps, and she smiled quietly, seeing herself in them. Some stayed, some left. All were welcome. Her story began to reach people she never met. Not as a headline or a performance clip, but as something shared from one person to another. A reminder that talent does not always look the way people expect. When asked about her journey, she spoke simply. She did not decorate it or make it sound easy. She talked about doubt, about being overlooked, about learning in silence, people. Listened because it felt real. She never claimed to have all the answers. She only shared what she knew, that it was possible to start. Late, that it was possible to be quiet and still be powerful. That being underestimated could become a strange kind of strength. Music remained her companion. Not her identity alone. She allowed herself other interests, other rest, other connections. She did not let one part of her replace. The whole balance mattered now. She understood that her worth did not rise or fall with each performance. This understanding gave her freedom. As years passed, the memory of that first public performance softened. It no longer felt like a sharp turning point, but part of a longer path, one that continued to stretch forward. Open and unfinished. She was still learning, still listening, still becoming, and that, she realized, was enough. Because the most important thing she had gained was not recognition or skill or opportunity. It was trust. Trust in her own voice. Trust that even when the world was quiet, even when no one was watching, what she carried inside still mattered. She had learned how to hear it, and she would never ignore it again.